A little girl whose kidnapper, we're told, forced her to live as his own personal sex slave. Today, though, Jaycee Lee Dugard is a free woman, nearly 2 decades after the kidnapping.
It's almost 20 years exactly to the day since Phillip and Nancy Garrido snatched 11-year-old Jaycee Dugard off the streets and brought her here, where she would spend the next 18 years in their backyard living as their sex slave. She was tased by Phillip Garrido and then barreled into a car by his wife, Nancy.
A little girl lost, and now 18 years later, a young woman found after enduring the unimaginable.
In June 1991, the unthinkable happened when Jaycee Lee Dugard, an 11-year-old girl, was abducted from a California street and remained missing for 18 years. The harrowing story of her disappearance, captivity, and the heinous acts that she endured at the hands of her captor, Phillip, stands as one of the most chilling and disturbing cases in recent memory. Jaycee Lee Dugard was born on May 3, 1980, to parents Ken Slayton and Terry Lee Dugard. Her biological father was not involved in her life and did not participate in the investigation that followed her kidnapping. When Jaycee was 7 years old, her mother, Terry, married a carpet contractor named Carl Probyn and gave birth to Jaycee's half-sister, Shayna, in 1989. Although Jaycee was close to her mother and sister, she was never close to her stepfather. She grew up in the community of South Lake Tahoe, California, and lived a relatively normal life until the day that forever altered her life on June 10, 1991. Understanding the story of the primary offender, Phillip, and his criminal history may provide insight into the extent of how deranged he truly is. It may also shed light on his repeat offending and the lapses in judgment by authorities that allowed him to stay free and commit such heinous acts against 11-year-old Jaycee for 18 years, a topic we will discuss further later on. Phillip Greg Garrido was born in Pittsburgh, California on April 5, 1951. He grew up in Brentwood, where he graduated from Liberty High School in 1969. Phillip's father, Manuel, later stated that his son had been a good boy as a child, but changed radically after a serious motorcycle accident. As a teenager, he turned to drug use, primarily meth and LSD. In later court testimony, Phillip admitted that he masturbated in his car near elementary and high schools while watching girls. In 1972, he was arrested and charged with raping a 14-year-old girl after drugging her, but the case did not go to trial after the girl declined to testify. The following year, he married his high school classmate, Christine Murphy, who accused him of domestic violence and alleged that he kidnapped her. In 1976, Phillip kidnapped 25-year-old Catherine Galloway in South Lake Tahoe, California, the same location where he later kidnapped Jaycee. He took her to a Reno, Nevada warehouse, where he raped her for 5.5 hours. When a police officer noticed the car parked outside the warehouse and then a broken lock on its door, he knocked on the door and was greeted by Phillip. Galloway then emerged and asked for help. Phillip was promptly arrested. Later that year, in a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, Phillip was diagnosed as a sexual deviant and chronic drug abuser. The psychiatrist recommended that a neurological examination be conducted because Phillip's chronic drug use could be responsible in part for his mixed or multiple sexual deviations. He was evaluated by neurologist Albert Peterman, showed considerable evidence of anxiety and depression and a personality disorder. He was convicted on March 9, 1977 and began serving a 50-year federal sentence on June 30 that year at Leavenworth in Kansas. While at Leavenworth, Phillip met Nancy, the secondary offender in Jaycee's kidnapping, who was visiting her uncle, another prisoner, on October 5, 1981. He and Nancy was married at the prison. On January 22, 1988, Phillip was released from Leavenworth to Nevada State Prison, where he served 7 months of a 5-year to life Nevada sentence. Phillip ended up serving only 11 years of that sentence, as the parole board deemed that he could be certified as not contributing to the menace to the health, safety, and morals of society. He was transferred to federal parole authorities in Contra Costa County, California. On August 26, 1988, Phillip and his wife moved to the city of Antioch and lived in the home of his elderly mother, who suffered from dementia. As a parolee, Phillip wore a GPS-enabled ankle bracelet and was always visited by a parole officer, local sheriff deputy, and a federal agent. It is evident that if officers had done their job properly, the suffering of the 11-year-old would have been prevented. Months after his release, he visited one of his victims who was working in South Lake Tahoe. He told her, "It's been 11 years since I had a drink." The victim reported this to Phillip's parole officer, and the agent essentially brushed the incident off, considering it too much of a hassle based on hysteria or concern of the victim, with little regard being paid to his actions. Phillip Garrido began to hunt for his next victim, Jaycee Dugard. On June 10, 1991, it was a typical school morning. Jaycee's mother, who worked at a print house, left for work early in the day, leaving her daughter and her husband in the house. Jaycee, who was 11 years old at the time, got ready for school and started walking up a hill, the school bus stop, which was not far from her house. However, her day took a horrifying turn when a grey car, possibly a Mercury Monarch, made a U-turn and approached her. The driver, Phillip Garrido, rolled down the window and used a stun gun to incapacitate Jaycee, rendering her unconscious before abducting her.
Grade class at school. On June 10th, 1991, as she always did, she walked up the little hill in front of her house in Lake Tahoe, California, to catch the school bus. She was dressed in her favorite outfit, pink tights and a white t-shirt with a pink kitty cat on front. She reaches the road. A gray car pulls up. A stranger rolls down the window.
And his hand shoots out, and I just feel numb.
He had shocked her with a stun gun.
My whole body is tingly. I don't know what it's from.
She falls to the ground unconscious. The man driving is Phillip Garrido, a convicted sex offender sentenced to 50 years in prison, but released after just 11. In the car with him is wife Nancy. Prosecutors will say she helped scout the little girl as his prize.
I heard the driver say, "I can't believe we got away with it," and he started laughing.
Phillip's wife, Nancy, covered Jaycee with a blanket and held her down as she drifted in and out of consciousness during the 3-hour drive to Phillip's property, located 120 miles or 190 kilometers away in Antioch. The only time Jaycee spoke was when she pleaded that her parents could not afford a ransom. The district attorney in the Jaycee case believed that Nancy had scouted Jaycee as a target for Phillip.
Convicted child rapist Phillip Garrido used to play guitar in playgrounds. His wife Nancy, working the camera, would surreptitiously zoom in on the kids. She was more than just the loyal wife of a sociopath.
You got me real good?
Yes.
Please?
Today, prosecutors released a new video from the back seat of her van as she coaxes a young girl to do the splits.
I bet you can go down really easy, huh?
Yeah, but that is easy.
Let me see you do it.
You know, we talking less than 20? More than 20?
It's got to be less than 20.
All of those kids are victims. Any of them could have ended up like Jaycee Lee Dugard.
Does it say record still?
Yes.
August 93, her husband fresh out of jail again. Nancy Garrido was out trolling the playgrounds. That's when this video was taken.
Oh, you didn't show me your split, did you? Let me see it now.
Want me to see it? Show you?
Mm-hmm.
The little girl actually spots the hidden camera.
This is on.
No.
Look, that light is on.
Oh, I don't know anything about that camera.
Nancy hurriedly covers it up.
You know how the other one I had to focus it to get up close?
Mm-hmm.
This sucker here will focus it automatically all the way up. Hey, that's enough of that. Oh God, you wouldn't have believed it how good it does it. Okay.
Rewind it, let me see it.
I'm gonna stop it here. When you move, when it's a moving person, it's tough.
What? To record?
Record.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now see the zoom lens? Oh, you can zoom in?
Oh, no. Shit. Where, did you push that?
Yeah. Is it gone far enough?
No.
Okay, that's as far. Is it still moving?
No, it's not.
Maybe you can pop it on your knee.
That's why I bought this, I thought.
You can completely relax and just, there you go.
You got me real good?
Yes. I can see you really good.
testimony saying, all of a sudden, his hand shoots out of the car window, and I feel this shock. I feel like my whole body wouldn't work. I was tingly and nothing worked. All of a sudden, I'm in the car, and there is something on top of me, and I feel like there is pressure on me. She then said she blacked out. At the same time, the kidnapping was occurring. Carl, the girl's stepfather, was in his yard and witnessed what happened, quickly got on his bike and chased after the car, but he couldn't keep up. The kidnappers were gone, and the stepfather immediately alerted the authorities.
911? This is 911. On Pioneer Boulevard, a wash zone. My daughter was just kidnapped. Top of the hill was a gray Ford. A man and a woman in the car.
Next thing I know, the car darts across the street, cuts her off, and I see a door fly open.
A few years after Jaycee disappeared, Carl and Terry split, with Carl explaining that the stress of the kidnapping was what led to the unraveling of their marriage. Even years after Jaycee was found, Carl continued to struggle to come to terms with what happened that day. He made this statement to the Daily Mail: looking back, maybe I regret I did not give her more hugs. Terry's family thought I was mean to her. I think they thought I was the reason Jaycee did not run away from the Garridos. But I can tell you now, I really cared for that girl. Despite several witnesses, including Jaycee's own stepfather, authorities had no leads to who had taken her, and this remained the case for the next 18 years. Within hours of Jaycee's disappearance, both local and national media in South Lake Tahoe began covering the story. In a matter of days, dozens of local volunteers joined the search effort, utilizing nearly every available resource within the community. Even dogs, aircrafts, and the FBI were involved in the search. Within weeks, tens of thousands of flyers and posters were distributed to businesses across the United States. Pink ribbons, symbolizing Jaycee's favorite color, were displayed throughout the town as a reminder of her disappearance and as a demonstration of support for her family by the community. Terry, Jaycee's mother, founded a group called Jaycee's Hope, which directed volunteers and fundraising efforts. They sold cassette tapes of the song Jaycee Lee, along with t-shirts, sweatshirts, and buttons to raise money for poster material, printing, and other related expenses. Organizations like Child Quest International and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children were actively involved in the effort. A reward was offered, which was noted on the posters and flyers. The kidnapping case attracted national attention and was featured on the June 14, 1991 episode of the Fox television show America's Most Wanted. In the following years, there was a continuous effort to raise child safety awareness, organize fundraising events, and hold candlelight vigils to mark Jaycee's disappearance, keeping her story in the public consciousness. As authorities continued their fruitless search, Jaycee was being forced into her new life 170 miles away in Antioch, California, where they began referring to her as Alyssa. Upon arriving at the Garridos' home, the Garridos took Jaycee, her head still covered with a blanket, behind their house, where they had constructed a series of homemade tents and sheds. Phillip placed Jaycee inside a tiny shed that had been soundproofed. Jaycee later stated in her memoir and an interview with ABC News that upon arrival, Phillip handcuffed her and left her naked in the shed, which he bolted shut, warning her that trained Doberman punishers outside the shed would attack her if she tried to escape. Phillip forced Jaycee into a shower with him, which was the first time she had been exposed to an unclothed man. During her first week in captivity, Jaycee remained in handcuffs, her only human contact being Phillip, who sometimes brought her fast food and talked to her. He provided a bucket for her to use to relieve herself. A week after the kidnapping, Phillip raped the still handcuffed Jaycee. For the first time, he continued to rape her frequently, doing so at least once a week for the first 3 years of her captivity. At one point, Phillip provided Jaycee with a television, but she could not watch the news and remained unaware of the search for her. After her kidnapping, Phillip moved her to a larger room next door, where she was handcuffed to a bed. He explained that the demon angels let him take her and that she would help him with his sexual problem because society had ignored him. Phillip would occasionally go on days-long meth binges he called runs, during which he would force Jaycee to keep him company by performing sexual favors and engaging in various other activities with him. Phillip made her listen out for the voices he said he could hear from the walls and often professed a belief that he was a chosen servant of God. These binges would end with Phillip robbing and apologizing to Jaycee, alternating with threats to sell her to people who would put her in a cage.
For months, a little girl locked in a shed saw only one person every day, Phillip Garrido, who warned her if she tried to escape, there were dogs outside the door. He threatened to sell her to other people, so she would promise to do more for him. And then, a month and a half after the first rape, he moved her to a new shed and put the stun gun out on the table where she could see it. He told her demon angels, voices in his head, had revealed that she was supposed to help him with his sexual problems.
And that you were saving other little girls.
Yeah. Yeah, how stupid is that?
7 months into her captivity, Phillip introduced Jaycee to his wife, Nancy, who brought the child a stuffed animal and chocolate milk, and engaged in the same tearful apologies to her. Jaycee related that Nancy alternated between motherly concern and coldness and cruelty, pressing her jealousy of Jaycee, whom she regarded as the one to blame for her predicament. She characterized Nancy, who worked as a nursing home aide, as evil and twisted. When Phillip was returned to prison for failing a drug test, Nancy replaced her husband as Jaycee's jailer.
He tested positive for drugs, including methamphetamine, submitted watered-down urine samples. In 1993, he finally did land back in federal prison for failing a drug test, and Nancy Garrido became Jaycee Lee Dugard's only jailer.
A whole month, he's gone.
Yeah, she said that he was on an island with a friend, but he was actually sent back to prison.
So it's the two of you?
Yeah. She would lock us in every night. She wanted to watch this scary movie called The Unborn. It was awful. It was very scary.
The Garrido's neighbor told the San Jose Mercury News that as a child he recalled meeting Jaycee through a fence in the Garrido's yard soon after the kidnapping. He said that she had identified herself by the name Jaycee, and that when asked if she lived there or was just visiting, she answered that she lived there. At that point, Phillip came out and took her back indoors. He eventually built an 8-foot tall, 2.4-meter fence around the backyard. That was the first time that she was allowed to walk outside since her kidnapping, and she also was never allowed to see a doctor or a dentist. During her 18 years hiding away in Garrido's backyard, she wrote about being afraid, lonely, depressed, and feeling unloved. Initially, she wrote about her family and wondered whether they were looking for her in time. However, her isolation and depression led her to crave any type of human interaction, even if it came from the Garridos. The Garridos manipulated Jaycee further by presenting her on 2 occasions with kittens that would later mysteriously vanish. When Phillip discovered that she was singing her real name in a journal that she kept about the kittens, she was forced to tear out the page with her name on it. The last time she would be permitted to say or write her name until her captivity ended 18 years later. As mentioned previously, a week after the kidnapping, Phillip raped the still handcuffed Jaycee for the first time and continued to rape her frequently, at least once a week for the first 3 years of her captivity. Around that time, the Garridos began to allow Jaycee freedom from her handcuffs for periods, though they kept her locked in the bolted room. On Easter Sunday, 1994, they gave her cooked food for the first time. The couple informed Jaycee that they believed that she was pregnant. Jaycee, aged 13 at the time, had learned of the link between sex and pregnancy from television. Jaycee watched TV programs on childbirth in preparation for the birth of her first daughter, which occurred when Jaycee was aged 14 on August 18, 1994. When the Garridos found Jaycee in labor, they gave her codeine, and Phillip told her he had watched videos about giving birth and knew how to deliver a baby. Jaycee said she was in labor for another 12 hours. After the birth of her first daughter, Phillip raped Jaycee less frequently, though he would nonetheless do so when he had taken drugs. The last time Phillip raped Jaycee was the day her second daughter was conceived. Her second daughter was born when Jaycee was 17 on November 13, 1997. Jaycee took care of her daughters using information learned from television and worked to protect them from Phillip, who continued his enraged rants and lectures. Jaycee coped with her continued captivity by planting flowers in a garden and homeschooling her daughters, teaching them as much as she could with only her 5th grade education. At one point, Phillip informed Jaycee that to pacify his wife, Jaycee and her daughters were to address Nancy as their mother, and that she was to teach her daughters that Jaycee was their older sister. When Jaycee and her daughters were eventually allowed to come into contact with other people, this fiction was continued, and Jaycee continued to act as Alyssa, the older sister of the 2 girls. Philip operated a print shop where Jaycee acted as the graphic artist. A customer of Philip's printing business claimed that he met and spoke by telephone with Jaycee and that she did excellent work. During this time, Jaycee had access to the business phone and an email account. Another customer indicated that she never hinted to him about her childhood abduction or her true identity. Witnesses stated Jaycee was seen in the Phillip household and sometimes answered the front door to talk to people, but never stated there was a problem or attempted to leave. While the family kept to themselves, the girls were sometimes seen playing in the secondary backyard behind the house, where Jaycee's living quarters are thought to have been located. The private area of the backyard included sheds, one of which was used as a recording studio in which Philip recorded himself singing religious-themed and romantic country songs, 2 homemade tents, and what has been described as a camping-style shower and toilet. The area was surrounded by tall trees and a 6-foot 1.8 meter high fence. An entrance to the secondary backyard was covered by trees and a tarpaulin. Privacy was enhanced by tents and outbuildings. Electricity was supplied by extension cords. The enclosure also housed a car that matched the description of the one used in the abduction. While held captive, Jaycee wrote down a list she called My Dreams for the Future. It is dated March 28, 2006, 3 years before she was rescued. The list included 1. See my mom. 2. See pyramids. 3. Ride in a hot air balloon. 4. Learn to drive. 5. Swim with dolphins. 6. Touch a whale. 7. Take a train ride. 8. Learn to sail an old-fashioned sailing ship. 9. Write a bestseller. 10. Horseback ride on the beach every day. Years after her rescue, most of the list is checked off.
Did you think about taking those 2 girls and running?
I'm sure I did. But it wasn't something I felt I could do.
Because?
The situation felt like it wasn't an option. I don't know how else to explain it. There was no leaving.
What would it have taken for you to believe you could leave?
I've asked myself that question many times. The mind manipulation, plus the physical abuse I suffered in the beginning. There was no leaving. Maybe if one of the girls were being hurt.
And everyone who thinks that maternal impulse would just scoop them up to run doesn't.
They were safe. I was being told that the outside world was dangerous.
Ironically enough, filled with rapists and pedophiles.
Yes, and pedophiles. I couldn't protect them out there. It's like what I knew was safe, the unknown that was out there was terrifying, especially when thinking about the girls.
Do you think you'll ever understand it? Why you didn't leave?
I don't think so.
During her captivity, there were multiple instances where law enforcement had the opportunity to rescue her, such as when officers visited the residence at least twice, failing the first time to request an inspection of the backyard, and the second when they did not detect the presence of Jaycee or her children in the area of the property that they did inspect.
Incompetent parole officers who visited the Garridos' home dozens of times while Jaycee Dugard was a prisoner there.
You got any further questions coming to the office between 8 and 5?
60 times. They may have been just feet from your daughter.
Yep. Unbelievable.
The electronic monitoring bracelet Garrido wore on his ankle showed how much time he was spending in the backyard prison he had built for Dugard. But none of the parole officers, who were supposed to be keeping an eye on him, ever bothered to look.
These were among several missed opportunities for rescue, which later led to criticism of authorities. Other opportunities include police failed to realize that Jaycee had been kidnapped south of South Lake Tahoe, the same location as Phillip's 1976 kidnapping and rape of Catherine Calloway. This should have prompted an investigation into Phillip's involvement. On April 22, 1992, less than a year after her kidnapping, a man called the Contra Costa County Sheriff Department from a gas station less than 2 miles from the Garridos home. He reported seeing Jaycee inside the gas station staring intently at a missing child poster of herself. The caller then reported seeing her leaving a large yellow van, possibly a Dodge, which matched the van found on the Garridos property. The license plate was not reported in the 1992 call. However, the caller never identified himself, and the police did not pursue the matter. Contradicting this story, Jaycee later reported that she never left the Phillip property from the day she was kidnapped until shortly before her first child was born, in August 1994. In June 2002, the Antioch Fire Department responded to a report of a juvenile with a shoulder injury that occurred in a swimming pool at the Garridos home. This information was not relayed to the parole officer, which had no record of either a juvenile or a swimming pool at the Garridos address. In 2006, one of Phillip's neighbors called 911 to inform them that there were tents in the backyard with children living there and that Phillip was psychotic with sexual addictions. A deputy sheriff spoke with Phillip at the front of the house for about 30 minutes and left after telling Phillip that there would be a code violation if people were living outside on the property. After Jaycee was found in August 2009, the local Contra Costa County Sheriff issued an apology to the victim in a news conference. On November 4, 2009, the reason why the officers did so little to inspect Phillip was clarified when the California Office of the Inspector General issued a report that enumerated lapses by the California Department of Correction and Rehabilitation that had contributed to Jaycee's continued captivity. The central finding was that Phillip was incorrectly classified as needing only low-level supervision, and all other lapses derived from that mistake. In his report, the Inspector General detailed an instance in which a parole agent encountered a 12-year-old girl at the home, but accepted Phillip's explanation that she was his brother's daughter, and the agent did nothing to verify it, even though a call to Phillip's brother verified that he did not have children.
Shortly after her rescue, federal and state parole agents would face intense scrutiny over how they failed to discover a kidnapped little girl for so long.
I looked outside in the backyard, which was his backyard was like a typical backyard that was it wasn't atrocious, but it wasn't well kept. There was a lot of debris back there. It was just a mess back there. Looked like a junkyard. So there was nothing unusual about that.
On August 24, 2009, Phillip visited the San Francisco office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and left a 4-page essay containing his idea about religious and sexuality, suggesting that he had discovered a solution to problem behaviors like his past crimes. The essay described how he had cured his deviant behavior and how that information could be used to assist in curing other sexual predators by controlling human impulses and the drive that drives humans to commit dysfunctional acts. On the same day, Phillip traveled to the University of California, Berkeley, with Jaycee's 2 daughters and visited its campus police office, seeking permission to hold a special event as a part of his God's Desire program. He spoke with UCPD special event manager Lisa Campbell. She perceived his behavior as erratic and felt that the girls were sullen and submissive. She asked Phillip to make an appointment for the next day, which he did, leaving his name in the process. Officer Ali Jacob ran a background check and discovered that Phillip was a registered sex offender on federal parole for kidnapping and rape. Phillip and the girls returned for the appointment at 2 p.m. the following day, and Jacob attended the meeting. The girls appeared to Jacob to be pale, as if they had not been exposed to sunlight, and she felt that their behavior was unusual. Phillip's several parole violations were a basis for an arrest, so Jacob phoned the parole office to relay her concerns, leaving a report on voicemail. After hearing Jacob's recorded message, 2 parole agents drove to the Gardios house later that day. Upon arrival, they handcuffed Phillip and searched the house, finding only his wife Nancy and his elderly mother at home. The parole agents then drove him to the parole office en route. Phillip said that the girls who had accompanied him to the university were the daughters of a relative, and that he had permission from their parents to take them there. Although the parole office had previously barred Phillip from associating with minors, and the university was 40 miles, 64 kilometers, from Phillip's Contra Costa residence, 15 miles, 24 kilometers. Over the 25-mile, 40-kilometer limit, he was allowed to travel from his home without his parole agent's permission. Nothing was done about these violations. After reviewing his file with a supervisor, they drove Phillip home and ordered him to report to the office again the next day to discuss his visit to the university and to follow up on the officer concerned about the two girls. He also instructed Phillip to come to the parole office with the girls' parents. Phillip arrived at the parole office in Concord, California on August 26 with Nancy, the two girls, and Jaycee, who was introduced as Alyssa. The parole officer decided to separate Phillip from the women and girls to obtain their identification. Maintaining her false identity as Alyssa, Jaycee told investigators that the girls were her daughters, although she indicated that she was aware that Phillip was a convicted sex offender. She stated that he was a changed man, a great person, and was good with her kids, comments that were echoed by the two girls. When pressed for details that would confirm her identity, Jaycee became extremely defensive and agitated, demanding to know why she was being interrogated. He subsequently stated that she was a battered wife from Minnesota, in hiding from her abusive husband. The parole officer eventually called the Concord police. Upon the arrival of a Concord police sergeant, Phillip admitted he had kidnapped and raped Jaycee. Only after this did she properly identify herself as Jaycee Dugard.
He nods his head 3 times and says, "A long, long, long time ago, I kidnapped her and raped her when she was a child." I asked him about the 2 little girls. Where are they? He said, "Oh, they're gone. They're gone. Their dad picked them up." Now, so I go, this isn't over, okay? I need to speak to those 2 girls' parents. I want to make sure that those parents know that you're taking them places, and that they know that they're aware that you're a 290 sex offender, parolee on parole. So tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, I want you in my office and those 2 little girls and a parent.
He immediately separated all of them, and then?
And I looked over at Nancy and I said, "Listen, Nancy, I asked Phillip to bring the parents of these girls here today. He didn't do that. If I don't speak with the parents of these girls, they're not leaving this office today." Immediately, Jaycee spoke up. She looked at me and she said, "I'm the mom. I'm their mother." And I looked at her and I said, "You're the mom?" And she kind of laughed and smiled and she said, yeah, I get that look all the time. I look really young, but really I'm 29.
It was later suggested that Jaycee showed signs of Stockholm Syndrome, a psychological phenomenon where a victim of abduction or captivity may develop positive feelings, empathy, or loyalty toward their captor as means of survival. In 2016 ABC News interview, Jaycee stated that her compassion and willingness to interact with her captor were her only means of surviving, saying the phrase Stockholm Syndrome implies that hostages cracked by terror and abuse become affectionate toward their captor. It's degrading. You know, having my family believe that I was in love with this captor and wanted to stay with him. I mean, that is so far from the truth that it makes me want to throw up. I adapted to survive my circumstances. She repeatedly stated that as a survival mechanism, many victims are forced to sympathize with their captor. Phillip and his wife were placed under arrest, and an FBI special agent put Jaycee on the phone with her mother. Jaycee retained custody of her children and reunited with her mother on August 27, 2009. After 18 years in captivity, Jaycee was finally free, and she would go on to tell the story of her time imprisoned by Phillip in the memoir A Stolen Life.
They're like, "You can see your mom," and I'm like, I can see my mom? It was like a question to them, you know, I can?
Following the arrest, police searched the Phillip house extensively for evidence of other crimes. Because Phillip had access to his neighbor's house, it was also searched for evidence. Police also searched the homes and businesses of one of Phillip's printing business clients.
Investigators are also now looking into whether Garrido may also be behind the murders of 4 women, some of whom were prostitutes, this back in the late 1990s, and that's why they've also expanded that search to the neighbor's place.
In 2006, we do know that that house at 1540 was vacant, that Damon Robinson did not live there. What we also know is that Phillip Garrido had access to that property. He used that property, and it looks like he lived on that property in a shed, so we know he was there. And that is why, primarily, we're taking a close look at that property.
Also on August 27, 2009, KCRA TV in Sacramento, California, interviewed Phillip in his jail cell by telephone. Phillip repeatedly told the reporter how he filed documents with the FBI on August 24, 2009, which when they were published would cause people to fall over backward, and that he could not reveal more because he had to protect law enforcement. And what happened was something that humans have not understood well. In the interview, Phillip denied he had ever harmed Jaycee's two daughters. He said their birth changed his life, saying, "They slept in my arms every single night since birth. I never touched them." On August 28, 2009, FBI spokesman Joseph Scudler confirmed that Phillip had indeed left documents with the agency, as he had claimed, but declined to discuss further details. The document, titled Origin of Schizophrenia Revealed, was eventually released by the FBI. It is about stopping schizophrenics from turning violent and controlling sounds with the human mind. On August 28, 2009, Phillip and his wife pled not guilty to charges including kidnapping, rape and false imprisonment. Bail review preliminary hearing was held September 14, 2009 at the El Dorado County Superior Court in Placeville, California. At the hearing, Superior Court Judge Douglas Phimister set bail for Nancy at $30 million. There was a no bail parole hold on Phillip. Phillip's attorney requested to have a psychologist or a psychiatrist appointed to conduct a confidential evaluation. Such examination can be used by the defense to assist in case preparation. An additional mental health examination can be ordered at subsequent phases in the proceeding.
Phillip Garrido appeared unmoved, even as a possible trial to decide his fate in the kidnapping of Jaycee Dugard made a substantial move forward. The court decided Garrido is competent to stand trial. The El Dorado County judge stated that a defendant must be capable of understanding the proceedings and assisting his attorney in his defense. The judge said sealed evidence showed Garrido satisfied those requirements, and all parties agreed. They also agreed that the Garridos' calls be suspended permanently, so Phillip wouldn't have the ability to sway his wife in any way.
After a while back and forth in court, with Nancy's defense attorney removed from the case for confidential evidence that has not been disclosed to the public, and Stephen Tapson appointed as her defense attorney.
And I don't particularly care for what Mr. Pearson did last time either, which was issuing a press release, which I think also crossed ethical boundaries. He's not supposed to do that either. He's not supposed to comment on the evidence. He's not supposed to reveal information which may or may not be admissible in a criminal case. He's not supposed to do that. So he's having problems with his ethical responsibility as well. I am doing my job. They should do theirs. And that's all I have to say.
A press conference was held on February 28, 2011. Tapson said that Nancy and Phillip had both made a full confession in the case. The development came as lawyers for both sides reopened discussion on a possible plea deal that had the potential to eliminate the need for a trial. Nancy's attorney acknowledged that she was facing 241 years and 8 months to life, and that he was working for a reduced sentence in the 30-year range. He stated that the prosecutor had acknowledged that Phillip was a master manipulator and that Nancy was under both his influence and that of substances during the period of Jaycee's kidnapping, so should receive some consideration, while alluding to parallels with Stockholm Syndrome.
Questions?
So Susan, Captain,
So what
told
happened?
everyone he expected a guilty
Yeah, he
person
shouldn't have been
flying out.
speaking for Phillip.
Was that the plan until...
I would say this. I would say that he should speak for his client.
How would you categorize negotiations with the prosecution?
They don't exist.
At all?
No. And I've been telling you that. You know, the whole deal thing was just a complete misnomer. Okay? So, and there's a couple of things that I want to say, and one is I see a lot of comments on blogs and stuff like that, you know, defense attorneys are making a lot of money on this case. We're not, okay? We're doing our job, or at least I'm doing mine, which is to zealously advocate for my client. That's what I have to do. I don't have a choice in that. I'm doing my job.
What's the best outcome you can, what is the best outcome for your client? What do you want to see happen?
Well, I need to do my job, okay? And I need to look at what the possibilities are.
And what is success? What is success for you?
Well, I think I've explained that, you know, no matter what the outcome is in this particular case, there is a parole hold in Nevada. So no matter what happens in this particular case, Mr. Garrido will be spending the rest of his life in prison. But that doesn't mean that I rolled over and played dead, okay?
It sounds like you were pretty angry when you heard the predictions of what's going to go happen today.
Well, I
what
mean,
was your reaction when you
who
first
does that? You know, who says those kinds of things? Mr. Thompson should never have done that. That was the wrong thing for him to do.
On April 7, 2011, instead of pleading guilty, as had been expected based on the previous statement, the Garridos pleaded not guilty to charges of kidnapping and raping Jaycee, as well as other charges. On April 28, 2011, the Garridos changed their plea to guilty for kidnapping and rape by force. On June 2, 2011, Phillip was sentenced to 431 years to life imprisonment. Nancy was sentenced to 36 years to life imprisonment. The sentence would allow Nancy to be eligible for parole. On August 2029, Phillip was imprisoned in California State Prison, while Nancy was sent to Central California Women's Facility. Jaycee did not attend the sentencing, instead sending a written message with her mother to read aloud in court.
Jaycee Dugard's mother read a statement describing her own suffering during her daughter's 18 years of captivity. "I could hear her crying," said Terry Probyn, "not in my ears, but in my heart." Then Terry Probyn read a statement on behalf of Jaycee. "I chose not to be here today because I refused to waste another second of my life in your presence. You make someone else suffer for your inability to control yourself. I have always been a thing of your amusement. I hated every second. You do not matter anymore."
After a while of their arrest, Jaycee aimed to shed light on and acknowledged the failure in supervising Phillip, and as Phillip had been on parole for a 1976 rape at the time of her kidnapping, she sued the state of California, which had taken over his parole supervision from the federal government in 1999. On account of the numerous lapses by law enforcement during instances in which her captivity should have been discovered by them. In July 2010, the state of California approved of a $20 million settlement with Jaycee to compensate her for various lapses by the corrections department that contributed to Jaycee's continued captivity, ongoing sexual assault, and mental and physical abuse. The bail was signed by California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger on July 9. On September 22, 2011, Jaycee filed a lawsuit in the United States District Court for the Northern District of California, accusing the United States of failing to monitor Phillip when he was a federal parolee. Jaycee stated in her lawsuit against the federal government that parole officials should have revoked Phillip's parole and returned him to prison for any number of parole violations that preceded her abduction, including testing positive for drugs and alcohol. On March 15, 2016, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit dismissed Jaycee's civil claims under the Federal Tort Claims Act (FTCA) because the U.S. is only liable in the same manner and to the same extent as a private individual under like circumstances under state law. In this case because the U.S. would not be liable under California law, Jaycee could not prevail in her FTCA claim. The majority rationale was that Jaycee had not been victimized by Phillip at the time he was placed under federal parole supervision, and there was no way to anticipate she would become his victim, and thus federal authorities in California had no duty to protect her or other member of the general public from him. When Jaycee Dugard was eventually found alive after 18 years, she went through a long adjustment period and familiar with what it was like to be loved or treated as a human being. She recalled the incident, saying, "Funny how I can look back now and notice how the secret backyard didn't really look so secret. It makes me believe that no one cared or was even really looking for me." In the days following her return, Jaycee's aunt Tina commented that Jaycee's children looked healthy. Tina said that upon meeting them after their escape, they always appeared and behaved like normal kids.
I want you to know that I looked at her and I knew her right away. There was, after 18 years, you have a sense of, could this possibly be true? I didn't sleep the night before. My heart was racing. It was horrible. Actually, I did fall asleep and then was almost late to the airport. But she knew me, and she came forward right away and it was a meeting of the middles. And together we hugged, and she said, "Auntie Tina." She absolutely knew who I was. She remembered us. She remembered me right away. She knew exactly who I was. I knew exactly who she was. It was, like I said, one of the happiest moments of my life. But what I can say is it's clear that Jaycee did a great job with the limited resources she had and the limited education. She was 11.
Right.
And so from what she knew as an 11-year-old and the schooling she had up to that point, she has made sure that her girls can read and write and do all of those things. They are educated. They are bright. I will give you an example. We were sitting together, one of the girls and I, and she pointed to the plant and she said, "That's nasturtium. We can eat that. Do you want to?" I said, "Well, no, not really." She said, "No, she didn't say we can eat it. She said, it's edible. Do you want to eat it?" And I said, "Well, no, not really, but it's good to know."
So her stepfather confirmed that Jaycee and her daughters were in good health and intelligent. The reunion was going well and they were proceeding slowly. He said Jaycee had developed a significant emotional bond with Phillip, and the two daughters cried when they learned of their father's arrest. Sean Hornbeck, an abduction survivor, also commented on the case, noting, "Coming out of what she's had to endure is like entering a new world. It's like a door has opened for her and she's emerged from a world that's black and white into one that's full of colors." He opined that the reason Jaycee never escaped on her own accord was that she was brainwashed. He further offered insight into post-abduction life, in that feelings of anger are normal for survivors and that therapy can enable them to move on. On October 14, 2009, People magazine published the first verified photo of Jaycee Dugard as an adult. On its cover, Jaycee's memoir, A Stolen Life, was published on July 12, 2011, receiving positive reviews. She also founded the GAYC Foundation, an organization that provides support to families recovering from abduction and similar traumatic events. In 2012, she received the Inspiration Award at the Diane von Furstenberg 3rd Annual DVF Award at the United Nations. In July 2016, she published the second memoir, Freedom, My Book of the Firsts. She has appeared in numerous television programs and podcasts to discuss her experience in captivity as well as her journey to recovery. Jaycee began animal-assisted therapy with horses, an activity she shared with her mother and her sister. As for Jaycee's daughters, she said she would not prevent them from seeing their father in prison if they wanted to. She stated, "I want them to make their own choices in life, and if that's something that they need to do, then I wouldn't be okay with it, but I wouldn't not let them do it."
And as remarkable as her recovery seems to be so far, she's still learning to adapt. Part of the therapy, led by Rebecca Bailey, riding and caring for horses.
I mean, maybe I believe in a higher power, but I believe in nature and what we see around us as healing.
Jaycee Dugard's story is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Her abduction and 18 years of captivity in the most heroic of circumstances represent a nightmare that few could imagine enduring. This case sits as a glimpse of hope for any victim or family of a victim out there.